everyone. Welcome back to the American Experiment podcast. My name is Grace Keating. I'm here with Kathryn Hinderacher.
Hello.
Good to have you back. Missed you last week.
Thanks. I know. I got like this little, I blame my sister because she has a 1-year-old and he is like always sick. I don't know. It's like that time of year where all the kids are sick. So every mom is sick and they're always like carrying things around.
Yeah.
So I just had a cold. It's not too bad, but I feel much better. What about you? Did you do any like Black Friday,
Not like intentionally. I feel like I was doing a bunch of Christmas shopping that just like happened to coincide with all of the Black Friday, Cyber Monday deals. I don't know. I didn't get anything big. I think I just got like 20% off some sweaters.
I got this sweater.
It's really cute.
Thank you.
Really cute. I was admiring it.
It was on sale.
Where was it from?
Abercrombie.
Nice.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, it's not just like did you get Abercrombie back in the day? Or is
No,
that like am I too old for you?
No,
Okay.
I never did.
We used to get these like the most insane things from Abercrombie, like looking back. I mean, they're like really early 2000s kind of style.
Yeah.
You know, and they always had this huge like moose on them and things like that. It was like so cool. Now they've completely come back. It's very interesting how they have they totally fell off because people were like, okay, that was cringy, exactly. Yeah. And like the rules they had for the people that worked there were insane and everything about their brand was crazy.
Yeah.
And then they made this huge comeback and they have great clothes now. Seriously, like good prices and high quality. And I mean, it needs to be studied. I feel like it's so interesting.
Really
I really
funny.
like it. Yeah.
Was he the CEO who was like, ugly people shouldn't wear our clothing? Or was that someone else?
Sort of. I think he said something like that, but there's also the former Lululemon CEO who said that I think large, like fat people shouldn't be wearing our leggings.
I didn't hear that one.
So there's two different, Good
God.
And the former CEO of Abercrombie actually he got in trouble for way worse stuff. I think he was like grooming and maybe like sexual assault involved with employees. It's like way.
Oh God.
So I'm sure he did say that.
Yeah.
But there was like more that people were.
That's not like the worst that he
that's not the worst
did.
part. So, but anyway, they've like basically totally rebranded and I kind of like it.
God, that's we should study that sometime. That is so interesting.
I know.
Anything else? Any fun Black Friday purchases?
Not really. That's about it. I basically just got like 2 shirts.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, well, guys, stay tuned for the second half of today's episode. Bill Glahn and Bill Walsh are going to do like a much needed breakdown of all the, I would say, like unfinished business of the last election. There were recounts happening. There were contested elections. There was, I mean, we might talk about this a little bit later, but the senator who they were using like taxpayer funds to pay her lawyers in her employment dispute.
On her lawsuit.
Kind of a confusing issue, so...
Yeah, we'll leave that to them.
We'll leave that to them. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and so stay tuned for that. I'm really looking forward to it. I need 2 intelligent people to explain what's going on
exactly.
to me.
It's always hard to know. Like it just depends where you get your news. It's like
yeah.
So when you get the Bills in the room, they've been around the block for long enough.
Yeah.
They know what's going on. They can tell you the truth about what's really happening.
Yeah, that's so true. Like you can give them a committee name and they can tell you what they do. You know, that's so far beyond my my knowledge. Let's start with probably my favorite part of the day, which is the something Kathryn found interesting, but this is the sports edition.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I have a sports update. As you all know, I'm on like this personal journey where I pay attention to sports.
When we're so excited and proud of you.
And I have been watching a little bit of, well, first of all, the Vikings are kind of like killing it. Did you watch
the
Vikings game?
No.
They got, I think it was like their highest scoring game ever, and they really just like destroyed this Kirk Cousins team.
Oh, I saw this.
Which I guess I feel kind of bad for him because I think we did like love him.
Because didn't they do the dance from White Chicks after they took him down? That's the only thing that I saw.
Yeah,
that was the only interaction I had with that game. Yeah,
they did that dance, and I think was it the same people who did the Parent Trap dance previously?
Maybe.
Which is also in London.
I don't remember.
Sports consultant Isaac. Okay, yes, it was the same people. So this is like a fun little thing they do. The dances are kind of absurd, I will say.
I think it's so fun.
And sometimes they're over the top. Like they'll just kind of like stop the ball or whatever. They're not even making a touchdown, and some dude's like, you know,
yeah.
I'm like, okay. Huge.
That's so true.
So anyway, that's interesting because they're like doing well.
Yeah.
But what I saw that really this was new information to me about the Timberwolves.
Okay.
Anthony Edwards was fined $25,000 on Monday for using profane language in an interview after the team's win over the Golden State Warriors on Friday. Okay. And this brings his total to $60,000 of fines in the past month.
In the past month?
In the past month. He keeps getting fined. But I didn't realize, like, they are patrolling these players' language like
No,
this? Like, and I'm
I
like,
didn't
okay,
either.
it said profane. I'm like, he must have said something really terrible.
Yeah.
He said the F word twice. And he was like, in defense of his teammates, he was like, that's effing incredible what they're doing.
So he was like cheering them on.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's right there, put the camera on him, guarding his ass off. Like, he's like hyping up his teammates, and they find him.
Okay.
$25,000. Like, if I got fined by our employer every time I said the F word in the office, I don't know. I would be racking up some fees too. Like, really? This is absurd.
I am not surprised. I feel like I'm sure that they don't get in trouble if they're swearing when they're like in practice or something, or like they're not being interviewed by someone. Again,
true.
like they're
It's
they're in the public eye. You're representing your team. I kind of get it. Now the amount is insane. Like that's an upsetting amount. And how much did we find out that he makes a year? Was it 42 million? For that, like that's an insane amount of money. So he can pay it, but
it just
I
seems
don't
so
know.
silly to me, like so performative. They're professional athletes. Obviously, they're like dropping the F-bomb. And this is like, this dude's in his locker room. This is like right after the game, and this guy who interviews him is right in front of him, and he's like sweating and giving this interview, and he drops the F-bomb. Like, so what? Seriously? That cost him $25,000? That's absurd. I think that's so funny. I don't know. I can't even believe that. Seems very performative because obviously, like, they're all professional athletes. They're not the greatest people. Like, why are we pretending that?
that's really
they are
funny.
by fining them
That's
for saying
really
that
funny.
word.
Like, don't
Silly.
pretend to be.
Don't pretend.
Oh, that's a really interesting take. Okay, I wouldn't have gone there. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, that's why I found it interesting. I'm like, these are obviously all kind of terrible people.
So
You know,
like you
like,
won't
have
be
you-
bothered.
I was just informed about, some other things that this Mr. Edwards has done. It's like, this is not like the world's greatest man.
Sure.
He's an incredible player.
Was the interview live? It wasn't, because that makes a difference too. If it's
guess,
live and they
yeah,
don't have a
he's-
chance to
Bleep him?
bleep them or I don't
I
know.
have
There's so
no
many.
idea.
It's really interesting though.
Yeah, but the Timberwolves, I think they're like decent, I would say.
That's nice.
So, yeah. Would you agree?
Yeah, 500.
500?
As in, like, 500.
You've
me, sports
immediately lost
consultant.
both of us.
As in, their record is about, like, 500. 50% wins, 50%
Oh, really? Is that good?
It's okay.
Average?
They're disappointing. They're a disappointing start.
Because they were doing
start to the
so
season.
well last year, right?
Correct. And now they're off to a slow start. But they just had a 4-game win streak.
Good for them.
All right. Well, best of luck to them, and best of luck in their self-censorship as they do all of their future media interviews.
Get some better media training for these poor athletes.
Stop attacking them in their locker room like he's like just played a game. I'm sorry. I find this so upsetting.
I do get bothered watching games like that and seeing someone messes up really badly and they immediately run over after the game and they're like sweating and
They always
and
ask
obviously
them the same
upset.
things
Ask
too, like,
ask,
about
like,
this
really-
game.
Yes, either
Leave
really
them alone.
boring questions or
Yeah.
like really personal, and it's like just let the man breathe. Like if there was some separation between the game and the badgering of questions. I don't know. I do get it is a little insane. Anyway, let's move on to serious topics.
suppose.
Daniel Penny, a
my
not
God.
guilty verdict and a win for self-defense, says David Zimmer.
Yeah, of course.
What are your thoughts on this?
I was
This was
following
really-
this so closely. I'm sure, like everyone, this was insane. And I think that part of what made it so, I felt like it hit home for me for a number of reasons, but one of them being we live in a place where we have terrible public transportation. For
Yeah.
example, this incident occurred on a subway in New York, and we have terrible public transportation with a huge crime issue here in Minneapolis. And we also have people like Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty, who would for sure go after someone
Yeah.
like Daniel Penny. If this happened in Minneapolis, we could be in a similar situation. And I think that's really sad. Mm-hmm. That's really sad. I mean, just to be clear, I think people know a lot of the facts of this case, but I think that it's not talked about enough how much this man, Jordan Neely, was threatening the passengers on the subway. He was saying someone's going to die today and lunging at people, and he was extremely high on drugs and threatening people. And the people who want to turn this into a race issue, of course, because it's a white man and a black man. Meanwhile, when Daniel Penny took down Jordan Neely and was restraining him, he had at least one black person helping him.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there were black people who were being really victimized by this Jordan Neely. Like, this is not a race issue. Like, there's
not.
white and black people all
That's so
over
true.
involved in this, and it's not clear cut. So if you see people making that argument, I mean, that's just a self-serving argument that is completely false.
Very easily,
Obviously,
very,
yeah.
very, easily disproven. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, it just like, I don't know. I think it's important too for, okay, I'll do like a us as women. It's important too for us as women to defend people who come to our defense. Like,
Yeah.
we ask, I think sometimes, we ask a lot of men to be there for women. I mean, women, think about it. Like, women can be more easily victimized than men in situations
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah.
If I talk to men like my dad or my fiance, they don't get nearly as like just generally bothered by like random people in these sorts of situations
Yeah.
as women do.
Yeah.
This is obviously an extreme situation where extreme measures had to be taken. But being a woman, you kind of like, I feel like you get more of this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And to have had a man there who was willing to take action and do something about this threatening individual to make sure he did not kill anyone like he said he
Yeah.
was going to is so incredible and really heroic of him that it's really sad. It's really sad. And the next time this happens, because of everything they've put him through, is a man going to step in and defend the women who are being threatened? Because that's the situation. And we need to encourage men to take on that role because women are more likely to be victimized. It's true.
Yeah.
We're smaller. We're seen as weaker, whether it's true or not, by men, especially cracked out men on the subway, who are trying to cause issues and
Trying to harm
obviously-
someone. Yeah.
Trying to harm someone. Obviously had issues of his own that he was facing, which is, really sad. But
Yeah.
I don't know. The whole thing makes me sad. And I think if women want to, do something about the fact that one of the things that makes us unequal from men is what I've just talked about, that we're
Yeah.
a little more easily victimized in these sort of situations. We have to allow men to step in and defend us and keep us safe. And that's a good thing.
And definitely not punish that behavior
Right.
and that impulse.
Exactly.
I was so disheartened. I mean, this was definitely like a great outcome for Penny. I was really disheartened to hear that now he's facing a civil lawsuit from the guy's father.
Yeah.
It just really makes me sad. And again, like so many negative comments online and again, turning this into a race-based thing.
Yeah. The civil suit's interesting too because I know the standards are different, like in a civil case than in a criminal case, right? So I think it's like, oh God, we got to get the lawyer in here. But it's, more likely than not, I think,
Okay.
if you're in a civil case, right, that this happened. And then if you're in a criminal case, it's like beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right. Yeah.
So he could still certainly be civilly liable, even though it's clear that on the criminal side, he did nothing wrong.
Right.
Does that make sense? I think I'm explaining
Yeah.
it right.
It sounds
which is
right.
sad. I mean, he obviously shouldn't be held accountable for potentially saving people's lives that day,
Yeah. It's also so frightening to me that this happened on public transportation because if I'm just thinking like if I was in that situation and someone was acting threatening, you like being on public transportation, you can't leave the situation. Like you are
Right, you're
stuck
trapped.
in that area until you get to your destination. And you are completely reliant on the people. Again, like as a woman, I'm completely reliant on someone in that area stepping in and defending me.
Yeah.
Like going up against Neely when he's in that state, like I would have no
Right,
chance.
no
Like I'm
chance.
not knocking him out. I'm not restraining
Yeah.
him. We are completely dependent on other people, good people to step in and defend us.
And we have seen examples of people not doing that. I mean,
Yeah,
there's videos
yeah.
you'll see where people are victimizing someone in a situation like a subway, and you just say, why isn't anyone doing anything? You're like
Yeah.
screaming at your camera.
Yeah.
I saw one sort of like completely different, but I was screaming at my camera recently when there was a pit bull, a dog, attacking a child on this playground, and there's like huge men and people standing around adults filming and not doing anything.
Oh, that's so gross. That's so
So-
upsetting.
What in the world? And so I feel like there's always outrage online and things like that if that sort of thing happens. Why didn't anyone step in? And then on the other hand, someone steps in, and here we've completely put him in this horrible
And punished him.
situation
Yeah,
and
exactly.
punished him.
Yeah.
But I mean, on the other hand, hopefully that people like this Alvin Bragg he's on his last leg. You know what I mean? Like we're done after this with people like that, and I hope people like Mary Moriarty in a very similar position here in Minneapolis.
Yes,
I
yeah.
hope with the recent election and people seeing the consequences of having these sort of people in power, they'll vote them out. We can just hope.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Also worth mentioning. Yeah, our own light rail system was ranked like the most dangerous in the country.
Yeah.
Compared with other light rail systems. I don't know. That's so frightening. I forgot to mention that. It could so easily happen here, and I hope that there's good people in our city there to help us if and when it does.
Do you remember when like this was kind of like I don't remember, this might have been like a year ago, but people were really talking about the dangers of the light rail system.
Yeah.
And their response was to like put up a sign.
Yes.
They put up a sign that was like, please don't commit crimes. Thank you.
I do. I just saw someone the other day talking about like, I grew up in Minneapolis, moved away to like, I don't know, Chicago, somewhere that had like a good functioning public transport system. And they came back to Minneapolis for a weekend. They were like, that was horrifying. That was awful. There were people like urinating on the light rail and finally, like just being really harassing. And then finally police came by and they like didn't do anything. They were like joking around with the harassers and just like walked away. And because that's what they've been told to do is like be very permissive of this behavior when it's bothering other passengers. That's crazy.
Okay, my favorite light rail story is my sister's husband.
Yeah.
He has to take the light rail for work every once in a while. And so he has like a number of amusing stories. But one of them is the doors open and he's waiting on the platform. And in it, he sees, I think it was 2 or 3 men attempting to start a fire in the middle of the light rail, like attempting to start like a bonfire, and he was like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna wait for the next one." And they have like a line where you can like text in these things, and so he's always sending in, here I just saw this incident or whatever. And of course, I don't think anything comes of it. They don't tell him. They don't update the person who reports it anyway. But I just think that's so funny.
Oh my gosh,
like, so emblematic of you could be doing whatever the heck you want on that thing.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone is paying attention.
Yeah,
which is sad. And the people who should care the most are the people who are like trying to get us to stop driving our cars around, the environmentalists.
That's so
They're
true.
like, stop driving your car, take the light rail. And meanwhile, on the light rail, like it's people smoking meth. Like I'm not taking the light rail.
Yeah, like let's not make it safe for you.
Why don't you
and then
focus
also
on that?
make you do it.
And then I'll consider it. Yeah, like okay. Deal?
Yes, that's so true. Let's move on. Let's see. Should we talk? Okay, which one should we go to?
Let's do. Oh man,
it's been a really newsworthy week.
It has been. I think we should leave the state representative who got her legal fees paid for by us, the taxpayers. Let's leave that for later in the interview because it's a little complex.
We'll let Bill and Bill take that
above
on.
my pay grade. But it is. I mean, we could do an update on Mr. Luigi.
Oh, Luigi.
They caught the assassin.
Mangione?
Yeah, Mangione. I don't know. But basically, they found the guy, the main suspect. Of the United Healthcare CEO's killing. Which obviously, I mean, this story is interesting because he's someone who is from Maple Grove, and the assassination was so awful. That video is just like so jarring
and all over the internet too. I mean, I was amazed like by how quickly it was splashed across every social media site. This video, I remember like videos on YouTube used to get taken down because they showed someone getting killed in them, and maybe they still are. I remember this being kind of an issue. Maybe they still are, but like that does not exist on Twitter apparently, or X.
No, it doesn't. I mean, for better or worse, I guess. But
yeah.
It's interesting how much of that gets into the public. Like, I remember I had this kind of reaction when I watched, there was a video in the Laken Riley case where her family was being told they found her body.
Oh, gosh.
It's like the family, they're so emotional. And I had to like click out, scroll away because that wasn't like a moment for me, as a viewer. It was caught on body cam. And then I think like the cop's camera. Yeah. And it gets released into the public, and it's like this extremely personal situation.
Yeah.
Not graphic in the way that this video was. Unfortunately,
but you still have that sense of like, I should not be watching this.
I shouldn't be watching this. Yeah. So, I don't know. I think it's good. And I think a lot of this is due that has come out of, like every cop now is really wearing a camera.
Yeah.
They have cameras on all the cars. And a lot of it is, open for, it depends on what state you're in, but a lot of it is publicly available. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean, I have mixed feelings about that. I think it's good in a lot of ways, but there are certainly downsides. And one of those was like, seeing that reaction of Laken Riley's family and seeing this really gruesome assassination, like right. I don't know. It was one of the craziest videos I think we've all seen.
Yeah. Oh, I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
Like reading about this main suspect's background, he was like valedictorian of his private high school and, had this great tech job, whatever, like by a lot of standards, seemed very normal and successful for a young guy. I mean, he's like 24. He's really young.
Yeah.
Were you
26.
surprised, or 26?
Yeah.
Were you surprised to hear? Were you surprised to learn that about him? Because I wasn't really, to hear this guy.
Oh my God, that's actually a really good question. Because
Yeah.
I think like a lot of people maybe from an older generation would be surprised.
Yes.
Whereas
yeah.
I'm like, oh, he went to college? Oh, he was radicalized.
Right,
Like he
yeah.
he went to some fancy prep school and then he probably went away. I don't remember where he went to college, but I'm sure he
Yeah.
went through that experience and was completely radicalized and had these insane views, really.
Yeah.
And felt that this was what had to be done. You know,
Right.
he was this insane, like anti-capitalist sort of type.
Which is what they teach in
Which is
universities
exactly
now,
what they
anti-capitalism.
teach,
Yeah.
And they really do. I mean, you're filled with propaganda and
Yeah.
you're really radicalized. So
Yeah.
I can imagine that's the most likely way I feel like that a person would come to these views now.
Yeah.
Which is so sad. But I think that's surprising for people of an older generation to hear when that wasn't their experience, but unfortunately it is, like our experience now.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad to hear that you agreed, because
Yeah.
I was hearing a lot of surprise again from people who are older.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was just thinking, like, this does not surprise me.
No.
Like, young, smart kid, going to good schools.
Right.
It's really not a far leap at this point.
No, I think that's like how you come to some of these really radical beliefs now is you actually listen to what they're telling you
Yeah.
in college classes.
Oh, that's so true.
Which is
you're doing the right
really
thing.
sad.
Yeah, I'm getting led down the wrong path. Definitely.
Yeah. And of course, like a lot has been said about this, but there were so many awful takes in the wake of this horrible tragedy.
Yeah.
One of them came from he's an employee of Hennepin County. I was just reading about this. Basically kind of saying he was happy with the assassination of this guy because he is a CEO in the healthcare industry.
Yeah.
Someone who works for Hennepin County. Maple Grove, where this man lived, is in Hennepin County. So I hope that guy gets swiftly fired.
Yeah.
I bet he won't. But
Yeah.
so many awful takes when sure there might be a system that's imperfect. That's for sure. That has little to do with what we're faced now, which is like such a horrible tragedy.
Yeah, no, there were videos of people like dancing in the street after this happened, celebrating it. It's so gross and very disheartening.
And I bet they're all like college educated types.
100%.
Like
That's exactly it. Yes.
Yeah.
These are not fringe. I mean, they are radical, but they're not fringe activists. I mean, a lot of these people are very normal kids,
Yeah, exactly.
Let's move on. Let's do something. I think this is actually going to be equally upsetting.
Oh my gosh,
your hot
I
take
forgot.
for the week.
Okay, it's not even a hot take, but it sort of is. What I found on the internet. Okay, every once in a while I go to the Star Tribune if I need like rage bait, I'm like, okay, what's the Star Tribune?
Let's get angry.
Let's get angry, yeah. Oh my God, I was not disappointed this morning. Okay, so first of all, they did this like whole rebrand, Star Tribune. I don't know if you
Did they really
know anything about this. They just call it the Minnesota Star Tribune now. I don't know.
I thought that's what they used to be.
I literally have no idea.
Did they go
I
back
just
to what
know
they
that
were
made
before?
There's a whole deal about this rebrand, and it seems to be mostly the same.
Funny. Oh, because it used to be the Minneapolis Star Tribune. Okay, so
You're right.
So
which
yes,
is because
yes.
so they're trying to like get more into Greater Minnesota.
Yeah,
They made a huge
this
thing
is
about
ringing
They
a
did
bell
all
now,
this,
yeah.
like these listening sessions in Greater Minnesota. They hired all these people to focus on Greater Minnesota. I log on to the Star Tribune, and the first thing I see is when Greater Minnesota isn't welcoming. Readers who aren't white and straight like me say their experiences aren't always so pleasant. And like, okay, spoiler, she lists like practically no unpleasant experiences. Like there's one about, a person that seems to have been not served for his race at some place. But it took place in the late 1970s.
Okay.
So,
Ma'am,
this is sad. But it was in the late 1970s.
Like you're clearly making it sound like this happened last summer.
Right,
Like
and
right
then
now,
she's like-
Greater Minnesota's discriminating against people.
does this whole thing about this lesbian couple and was like this this lesbian couple was like, well, two girls who are together, if you have an issue, leave. Otherwise, the keg is there. Most people stayed. Where there's a gathering of people from Greater Minnesota. The whole thing is like most people stayed. I'm like, what did you get from this?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. But the whole article is just nevertheless harshing on people in greater Minnesota and calling them, I mean, she literally quotes someone saying they are bigoted, transphobic racists.
Holy
They are
cow.
just too cowardly to admit it. About people specifically in greater Minnesota.
I don't even know what to say to this. And like her whole article clearly is rage bait in and of itself, like intentionally trying to anger people over a problem that is virtually non-existent based on the examples that she's giving.
She could not find examples. Like this article has no examples except for the one from the late 1970s.
Like she started with her headline and worked backwards from there.
And really could not find much at all.
I love that they're trying to like branch out into greater Minnesota and make them seem like they're not just for like the city elitists, and this is what they come out swinging with. Yeah.
And they like someone needs to tell them, you are so behind the times. You are not with the times. Like have you seen what happened in the election? Have you seen what, Daniel Penny, he's free to go? Have you seen the way our country is moving? It's not towards more identity politics based in nonsense, like things that are completely untrue, made up. Move on.
People are not taking you at your face value anymore.
No, you need to, this is not the direction of the country. You need to adjust. This is not it anymore. Move past the identity politics. Focus on real things. Report on real news issues, not whatever the heck this is.
Was this from the editorial board, or was it like an op-ed submitted by a reader?
No, it's not an op-ed. It's from okay, do you see this? What do you call this? So it's kind of the opinion of one of their staff writers.
Yeah, because the credit is the Minnesota Star Tribune. Yeah, you're right. So it's the opinion of one of their writers.
She's a columnist for the Minnesota
So it's a column from one of their writers.
Focused on the issues
their names
and
on
people
it.
Of greater Minnesota. Ma'am, Karen?
You really don't. You are really not focused on it.
You're letting your politics get in the way. Let me be the first to tell you and not the last.
I thought this would be a really upsetting segment, but this was really just funny. This was...
You have to
really
laugh.
Funny.
I mean, these people are out of touch.
Yeah,
and that's
so
you
true.
have to laugh at it. How else are we going to get through the day?
Amen. Gosh. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us this week, guys. Let's kick it over to Bill Walsh and Bill Glahn talking about the last election. See you next week. American Experiment is supported by thousands of individuals like you. To join the movement, go to www.americanexperiment.org and click the yellow donate button. From all of us here, thank you.
All right, we are back with the American Experiment podcast. My name is Bill Walsh. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing. I am joined by my colleague, Bill Glahn. So it's going to be the Bill and Bill show for the second half of today's podcast. And we're going to do just kind of a miscellaneous hit on some state representatives mainly. I think we're going to talk about two outstanding House races, and then one state rep that won her election but had some Rules Committee action around her. So let's go in no particular order. Let's start with, I think it's District 54B in Scott County. Tabke is the winner, but only by 14 votes, and we've lost 20 ballots in the process. An election contest has been filed. So the Republican lost, but the county also announced after investigation they lost ballots. Bill, give us you have the update on. You've been writing about this race.
Well, I actually rather do the update. I want to go back and do the background. So on election night, we had two races in Minnesota that appeared to have flipped to the Republican, where we had Democratic incumbents. One was in this Shakopee area down in Scott County, and another one was up in the St. Cloud area, where the questionable results seemed to be focused on Sherburne County. And so on election night, they posted on the official Minnesota Secretary of State website results with allegedly 100% of precincts reporting showing upsets where the Republican had knocked off the Democrat. And as it turned out, they kept counting the votes, and the result the next morning ended up different, where the Republican lost and the Democrat retained the seat. They've continued to do some investigation into what happened in the Shakopee area. And while they were doing their due diligence, this is the county election, city election officials discovered 20 ballots that they couldn't account for. These were absentee ballots that had been verified by the county level canvassing board, that when they went to go and count them, they couldn't find them.
So they know they
existed. They know they existed at one point. They were introduced. They were signed off by the canvassing board, and somehow between the canvassing board and the machine to count, 20 votes vanished. Keep in mind, the quote final result in that race was the Democrat winning by 14 votes after they had done a recount, but they couldn't recount these 20 votes they couldn't find. and they believe they were thrown away and then later shredded and sent to a landfill. So they're not going to be able to recover them. But because the number of missing ballots exceeds the number of votes by which the Democrat won, we cannot know with any certainty what the result was. We don't know what those ballots said.
Vote determinative, I think, is the legal term. Vote determinative. So it's interesting because I was watching this and I was thinking of the past elections. There have been cases where there have been election contests filed, which is essentially a lawsuit that's filed in this time period between the election night and when everything is canvassed and when the person takes office. So timely lawsuit, an election contest contesting the election results. There have been lawsuits in the past that have been filed where it's been the other way, where we've got an overcount, and there's maybe too many votes accounted for. And I've seen judges do this as a remedy, because what you're looking for is a remedy. How do we remedy this situation? If we agree that this is a problem, which on its face certainly looks that way, what's the remedy? And so one remedy used to be, if there's I was thinking about this, in an overcount, they would literally randomly remove ballots from the pile. And that they've instructed election officials, okay, take out 15 ballots or 20. Let's say it's 20 in this count. Take out 20, recount it, luck of the draw. Which 20 did you take out? That's the election. They'll put some randomness so they can do that. But in this case, that doesn't really work because you don't want we're missing ballots. So the remedy that the House Republicans have asked for, or the lawsuit asked for, is a new election, which is a special election. Is radical, but essentially do it again. Is there any other way to remedy this without having to vote over again?
I don't think so, because we don't know what was on those 20 ballots. And people are trying to say, oh, the envelopes were never opened, so maybe some sort of random assignment could be made. We don't know whether the envelopes were ever opened. This is just conjecture made by local officials trying to explain how they screwed this up. So we don't know. The ballots could all be for the Republican. They could all be for the Democrat. They could be a mix. We have no idea because we have no physical evidence of the ballots any longer. So the only real remedy is a do-over. Let's have the people of Shakopee, Scott County vote again, and then we'll try to do it right this time. And assuming it all goes according to plan, we'll have a result we can trust.
And I did something that I think a lot of people did, or at least election junkies did. And I think you pointed out in your reporting that the Star Tribune reporter, I think, did this too, is that I ran and said, where are these from? And I think we know what precinct they're from, right? Or maybe two precincts. So I ran and looked, what was the outcome in that precinct to all the other votes? And the Democrat won. So of course the Star Tribune reporter said, well, they probably just means that the Democrat was going to win anyway. So move on. And but that doesn't really answer the question, because
you're multiplying
thousands of votes in that precinct. So
you're multiplying that these are a random assortment of ballots, but the fact that 20 are missing and unaccounted for, we can't find the ballot or the envelope they came in. People make assumption, saying, well, it's probably just a mistake, but we don't know. We haven't heard the name of the clerk or the person who mishandled these ballots. We don't know. Somebody opened them. Oh, I really hate Donald Trump. I'm going to throw these 20 ballots out because they're Donald Trump ballots. So
I wonder what do we predict is going to happen here? I mean, it's going to happen soon. This lawsuit, obviously it's very timely. We got to get this done before, I guess they certified the election anyway, which I don't quite understand. Usually an election contest would prevent the certification until the election contest is finished, but they went ahead and certified it. It's got to happen before the end of the year, before swearing in of the new rep. So, I mean, remedies, they're asking for a new election or a special election to be declared. That's a radical thing for a court to do. They'll probably, if that happens, there'll be an appeal by the losing party in that. Assuming the Democrat would say, no, I already won, I'm going to appeal. Goes to the state Supreme Court. Who knows what they would do? So it could be stuck in court for a while, but that means they probably can't seat that person, though, which is really important in a 67-67 tie. If this thing isn't finished, but then what if the court's going to, they're not going to want to do that. They're not going to, predicting Minnesota judges, because I've been watching them for years, they're not going to want to do a new election. So how are they going to come up with a reason not to do a new election? They'll probably use some of this logic we've just talked about. Well, we looked at the precinct results. It probably was going to accrue for the Democrats. So it's just not enough to overcome. We got to stand with what's going on. So sorry, you lose, you're on. And then an appeal.
But again, that's just making assumption after assumption and multiplying them, which gives you nothing. So
it gives you
maybe some clerk opened 100 ballots and decided that these 20 were the ones that were going to be discarded. We have no set of facts by which to assume that it was just 20 randomly misplaced, and it wouldn't favor one candidate or another, because from the time the canvassing board approved them to be included in the pile, and by the time they got to the counting machine, they vanished. And there has been no accounting for them of what happened in between. People
You're
just
making
guess.
logical sense.
People just try to guess a benign explanation, and you don't have any facts and evidence to reach this conclusion.
You're making logical sense. Sadly, Minnesota courts often don't do that, and so I'm just what's the word? Pessimistic about what a judge might do in Minnesota on this. But I hate to be a news person. They always say this in newscasts. Well, we'll have to keep our eye on this one. But really, we will have to keep our eye on this one. We should know soon what's going to happen in that race. And here's the thing.
Let's circle back to this. We're going to talk about the rep who doesn't actually live in his district and what the remedies for that are. So we'll talk about that. We'll circle back to this case.
Well, this is one thing. In this one, in the Scott County race, it was ultimately 14 votes separates them right now from the ballots that we have. So a special election is a real 50-50 shot as to who wins this thing, with the balance of power at stake. So this really could, if they do this election again in a special, the loser in the moment is the Republican candidate, could end up being the winner, which would change the outcome of the House to 68-66 in favor of Republicans. Huge ramifications for that. So that's why that one is really important. Now, the next one, not so much the case. In the Roseville seat, the margin was 60-40, I think, for the Democrat. But the problem for the Democrat is he doesn't live in the district that he ran in. And man, oh man, the evidence is just overwhelming. And just my little joke on this, in the history of residency disputes for legislators, and they've happened many times over the years, usually after a new map comes out, and people decide where they want to run, and they don't quite live where they want to run. But the history in Minnesota has been Republicans get thrown off the ballot, Democrats get to stay on the ballot, because the courts have just been that way in the state, sadly. But so just to review the law a little bit, you have to be a Minnesota resident, but you have to live in the district that you filed to run in for 6 months prior to Election Day. So election's the first week of November, so that means first week of May, you have to be a resident of the district you're running in. Now, forever in the state of Minnesota, that meant you have to physically reside in the district. And that was the standard, physically reside. I'm going to do a little history here, but in 2002, after the redistricting map came in, some research was done at the state Republican Party on 3 different candidates that we felt, I'll say we because I was involved in this, we felt did not physically reside in the districts and where they lived. One of them was Lawrence Solberg, state rep from Grand Rapids. He lived in Bovey, Minnesota, which is essentially a suburb of Grand Rapids as you head towards into the Iron Range. And his district, Bovey was no longer in the district that he ran in. And so he pretended that he bought a townhouse in Grand Rapids. We'll get back to that. Another one was Senator John Hottinger in Mankato. And he got redistricted out of his district and claimed that he lived in Mankato in an apartment. A third one was, I'm going to forget her name, but she was in Eagan. And we discovered through all kinds of research that none of these people, these 3, lived in the district and filed complaints to get them thrown off the ballot early in the I think after the primary, but early in the process. I mean, before the election, well before the election. So one of the things we did in this process is we served the lawsuits on these 3 representatives or candidates at the home where they weren't supposed to be. And we found all 3 of them at those homes. That was one of the kind of little kickers we did. We had an intern serve Solberg in Bovey coming home with his groceries in his hand. You've been served. We served the Eagan woman in her driveway. We were actually sitting in the parking lot. My colleague and I, I'll just say the name, was Michael Broadcorp. Michael Broadcorp and I were working together, and we're doing like a Dumb and Dumber routine. You go do it. No, you do it. No, you do it. And then she comes down the aisle comes down the driveway to get the newspaper in her pajamas, essentially. Michael Broadcorp later ended up in the Court of Appeals, arguing this election contest or this dispute. And they were saying, that wasn't pajamas, that was a sundress, and they were having a campaign meeting at 7:30 in the morning on Saturday. That's why she was at the wrong house. They were using the house for campaign meetings. Ridiculous. Hottinger was in an apartment he claimed to be in Mankato. I got a call during the campaign that said, because we got it in the newspaper, and said, hey, I lived in that apartment all the way to June 1st. I lived in that apartment that he claims to live in. So we got an affidavit from him. And then Hottinger quickly said, well, no, yeah, the apartment wasn't quite ready yet. So I lived in this other space in the building that the landlord had set aside for me. By the way, it was an office with no restroom, no bathroom. So that's where Hottinger claimed to live. He was like the majority leader in the Senate at the time, but he claimed to live in a business in the same building where the apartment wasn't available till June 1st. These guys are making it up on the fly. And then Solberg just said he rented a town, he bought a townhouse from a guy. The guy who bought the townhouse saw it in the news and said, we didn't close until July. So he signed an affidavit, came down to the cities and testified in court that he lived in that townhouse. Solberg bought the townhouse, and the guy says, yeah, it was really weird. He wanted to come over and stay the night, like the first week in May, even though we didn't close. And so he took me out to Perkins. We went to dinner. He came over with a blanket and a toothbrush, and I put him up on the couch. When I woke up in the morning, he was gone. So Lauren Solberg just pretended to live in the place one night. Anyway, I'm telling you all this history to say that it went to the Supreme Court in Minnesota, and the Supreme Court said, they're all good. They can stay on the ballot. Physically reside is no longer the standard. It's intent to reside. You just need to intend to reside in the precinct before the election, 6 months. So Lauren Solberg had changed his fishing license already, so he intended to move. That was the new standard. Ridiculous, absurd, criminal, but that was the new standard. We lost all those. Fast forward to another rep. We'll do the history here. Bob Barrett, Republican. They caught him not living in his place, very similar to the situation we have in Roseville right now. They put a GoPro basically on his front door, and over the weeks and weeks leading up to the election, he never showed up at the door, never was in that house, the house that he's supposed to be living in. And he was thrown off the ballot. That seat was vacated. They had to have a special election to replace him. That was just slam dunk. This one looks very similar. Now, you've been following this a little bit, Bill, right? This is this Curtis Johnson, I think his name is, says he lives in an apartment in Roseville, but his home is in Little Canada. And there are volunteers that have extensive video of him, GoPro, similar thing, where they've got him dead to rights. So that will this happen is, I guess, is the question in Roseville.
Right. So he rented a small apartment in Roseville. I don't know what the dates are, but he claimed he lived in there. And it is ridiculous on his face, the claims he was making versus all the physical evidence, eyewitness testimony that he didn't in any real sense live in this apartment. But you're right. He rented the apartment. Does that show he intends to live in this district once he takes office? Are we following the letter of the law, or is this, laws only apply to Republicans, never to Democrats? We'll find out. But again, the remedy for this is put this question to the body. So the 134 members of the State House of Representatives could be asked to rule on this. And as I understand how it works, when you have a question like this in front of the body, and you're the subject of that question, you can't vote for yourself or against yourself or whatever. You can't cast a vote on this question because you are the subject to it. You are conflicted out of participating. And so if it's put to the body, the House of Representatives gets to vote on whether to seat this representative for Roseville, or in the case of the returning Democrat rep in Shakopee, if it's put to a vote of the House and you can't vote for yourself, then the obvious result, barring weird circumstances, would be you would lose 68-67. Or sorry, 67-66.
Yep.
67-66. And the result would be you have a new election. And you're probably correct. Given the demographics and the voting history of the Roseville district, whether it was this guy or some other candidate, a Democrat would probably be elected. But when? When would that occur? January, February? In the meantime,
right,
the Republicans would have that one seat, 67-66 majority, presumably control of the House and the committees while we await the result of this election. The one you said, the Bob Barrett one, the Republican, again, Republicans had the majority and a large enough majority that seat could just be vacant for a couple of months and it wouldn't affect the operation of the body. But either the case in Shakopee or the case in Roseville, should that seat be vacant for any period of time, then it gives one party control for however long it takes to resolve that. And
it's fascinating to kind of war game this, because they could like you say, vacate that seat, declared vacant or not seat that member, and then it would be vacant, and then it would take, governor would have to immediately call a special session because they would be in session and the law would be fill that seat immediately. But immediately is 45 days. I mean, the fastest you can move is because you've got to have a writ of special election. You've got to have so much time to file, and then a primary, and then a general. So you've really got a 45 to 60 day time limit, the fastest you can go. So in the meantime, you could have an election for speaker. And you could elect a Speaker of the House and win 67 to 61 with a simple majority and install the Speaker. The Speaker could then appoint committees. They could start running the House. The challenge would be you can't pass a bill with 67 votes. You need 68 votes to pass a bill or piece of legislation. But at least you could run the schedule, what comes up. And then here's the other kicker. Once that 68 member reappears after a special election, the other side might not be able to undo that speaker vote, because you'd have to make a motion to elect a new speaker. That motion would fail 68 to 68, presumably, if the parties stick together. So you might be able to keep that Republican speaker in, if it goes this way for the rest of the session. It's all kind of fun to war game out, but there's a lot of variables in this. We'll have to see. And one of the variables is, are Republicans strong enough to actually take those actions? If you look at the 1978 election, and a similar tie shows up in 79 in January, Republicans at that time were not strong enough to really play their cards the way they should have. And, they took the high ground. Well, I'm not going to vote on this because it affects me. So, of course, the Republican doesn't vote. Democrats take advantage. The subject of the controversy gets really stressed out on the floor, literally has a heart attack on the floor, goes to the hospital, and the Democrats come in. Irv Anderson was the Democrat leader at the time, took advantage of the guy being in the hospital, and took power and had power till the end of the session. So they play hardball. Sometimes we don't. So we'll have to see how Republicans do in that scenario. So again, we'll have to watch this election contest and see what happens. This residency dispute. It could happen in court. It could be, or it could happen, like you say, on the floor when they vote to seat their members. And the Constitution, the bodies are in charge of who sits in their members after an election. So that power is given to them. So let's do one more House member. The House is where all the news is this week. House Rules Committee wrote, you broke this you were the first one to write about this, and now it's luckily and thankfully gotten a lot of press. House Rules Committee voted to pay the legal fees of a state rep who was in a dispute with their employer. Their employer, there's a law in Minnesota, if you go to the legislature and work, they got to keep your job. And apparently their employer didn't like that and didn't keep her, and they sued. There was a lawsuit. She prevailed in the lawsuit. We find out now, you didn't know that originally when you wrote your piece, but she prevailed in the lawsuit, and we still paid her legal fees. I don't understand why the taxpayers are paying her legal fees in her dispute with her employer, but this is Minnesota. So can you explain that?
Right. Well, I'm going to provide some backstory, because you've done the same thing as we did in that earlier case in Shakopee, just taken statements at face value that turned out to be incorrect or actually false. So what happened, there was a rep in that Eagan area seat who left the legislature to take a leadership position in a nonprofit. So she resigned her seat, and they had a special election. And this special election took place in December of 2023. And Bianca Vernig is the name of the rep. Bianca Vernig won the special election. As far as we know, she lives in that district. There's no controversy there. But she took her seat in January or February, whenever they convened the 2024 session. And she served that term out representing the Eagan district. And apparently what happened, according to her statements, are she returned to her regular daytime job. So during session, you spend most of your time at the Capitol. You don't really have time to work your permanent year-round job. And there is a statute on the books that protects elected officials. You're an elected official, Bill Walsh, a city council person, school board members, state reps, state senators, who work essentially part-time as representatives, as elected officials, and are not expected to get full-time pay from these jobs. So it's a statute to protect retaliation by your regular employer against you because you have to miss time to fulfill your duties as an elected official. So, you work for the Center of the American Experiment. Senator American Experiment couldn't retaliate against you because you're missing time at work because you have to go and fulfill your city council duties. So that's what she alleges. She alleges she returned to her employer, and we shouldn't mention them by name. They're called Brightworks. They're a nonprofit, but they're a little bit of an odd duck. They exist as a buying cooperative on behalf of a bunch of school districts. And there are several of these around the state where school districts have gotten together to buy supplies collectively, try to increase their purchasing power by buying in bulk. And these nonprofits, and she worked for one of them, and they work on behalf of school districts. But they themselves are not a public entity. They're a nonprofit, a private entity. So she went back to work after the session ended, May, June, whenever that was, earlier in the year. She maintains that they cut back her hours or they cut back her role. These are statements she has made. There was no lawsuit. She never filed a lawsuit. So what she did was she hired a law firm or an attorney to represent her in negotiating a settlement agreement, a buyout, if you will, with her employer. And so they reached a settlement agreement. So the Rules Committee met last week. And as we mentioned, they're going to be 67-67 tie, barring unforeseen circumstances. But right now, in December, Democrats are still in control. They have a Democrat running the committee. They have a Democrat majority that is on the committee. And so they added an item to their hearing or committee hearing last week to pay the private legal bills of this sitting member. She herself did not appear before the hearing. And Republicans, members of the committee, asked to see the settlement agreement and were refused. They would not share. They obviously had the settlement agreement, the Democrats did. They would not share it with the Republicans. As a result, all the Republicans voted no. All the Democrats voted yes. And because they currently have a majority, that's prevailed. And so it turned out over the weekend, media people somehow got their hands on the settlement agreement. She agreed to be paid $108,000 from Brightworks to leave her position.
Wow.
You know, most people, when they're involved in a legal dispute, again, not a lawsuit, a legal dispute, they're expected to, when they get a settlement in their favor, pay their lawyers out of that.
Yeah.
But here, she got $108,000 to leave her position. The settlement agreement makes explicit that the Brightworks isn't admitting that they did anything wrong. They don't admit to breaking the law. And in fact, they have clauses in the settlement agreement that both parties, the state rep and Brightworks, agree that no laws have been broken, that they release each other from any claims. And all of this is against the narrative that was put forward by Democrats in that committee hearing, that she was the victim, this company broke laws, that she was the victim, and because the laws broken involved her working for the State House of Representatives, it was only proper for the State House of Representatives to pay the legal bill.
Such a stretch. This just makes me upset. So I can name 10 lawmakers that I worked for that ran for office and their boss said, "Oh, this is great. It'll be great having you in the legislature. It'll be good for the company. Yeah, go do it." And then after the first session, they say, "Hey, you know what? You were never here. We had to hire somebody to do your job. This really isn't working out for us. We're not going to be able to do this anymore." I know many Republican lawmakers over the years, over the 30 years I've been around doing this, that have had that happen to them. It's very difficult. We've had many, many members leave the legislature because they couldn't have an outside income that was compatible with being a legislator. And to see that this happens to a Democrat and she's gonna sue or not even sue, just dispute, and then we're going to pay her legal bills for this, really makes me upset. This is nothing new. This law notwithstanding, there's been many legislators over the years that have had trouble keeping an outside income and being a legislator at the same time. And so for the taxpayers to have to be on the hook for her legal fees in this dispute is outrageous. They need to fix this. I don't know how they can. I mean, presumably they get a majority on this committee. Some of the other scenarios we've gamed out earlier in this conversation, they could undo this. I assume the check's going to get cut. I don't know if you're going to have to get a demand letter to get it back and try to collect that money back, but man, this is an outrageous waste. I'm just going to say it. and as the chair of the Golden Turkey Committee, I feel empowered to do this. This is an early nominee for Golden Turkey, although this one is not fun. I mean, Golden Turkey is a fun award where we kind of make fun of silly spending. This is beyond silly spending. This is outrageous spending of taxpayer money to help a colleague enrich themselves and pay their legal bills. With there's no connection to the law or their ability at the legislature. No connection. In my opinion.
Well, again, I attribute a little more significance to this even go forward, because you have the chair of the committee who's the Democrat floor leader. His name is Jamie Long, represents Minneapolis. And he and the members of the Rules Committee is the most powerful committee in the House of Representatives. And we had all this talk after the election when we looked like we're going to be in a 67-67 tie, reaching across the aisle. Everything's going to be done on a bipartisan basis. We need to turn the page and one Minnesota and all this happy talk. And at the very first time of asking, the very first time that an action is taken, Democrats use a partisan advantage to enrich one of their members at taxpayer expense. This doesn't tell me the next 5 months are going to go swimmingly. If this is how they're acting when they still have that narrow partisan majority for the next couple of weeks. So Republican members who are on the short side of this vote, but who will soon be at least co-equals in the committee, have asked for another meeting of the Rules Committee to bring up the very facts that I brought up, that the narrative that they were given before the vote doesn't correspond to the actual facts as represented by this settlement agreement or by statements made by this employer. So we were told something that turned out not to be true. A vote was taken on that basis. We should at least have a motion to reconsider the vote and put Democrats on the record that, and again, one of the Republicans wasn't present because this Republican had a conflict schedule.
Maybe they were working in their day job,
Right. Well, no, they were working in their capacity as a state rep, and they knowingly scheduled it when they knew she wouldn't be available.
Yeah.
So let's get the full committee to reconsider this vote and have all the Democrats on the committee say, no. Now that we have the full set of facts, we're going to make the same decision. But I think at a minimum that should happen. That we have a do-over on that vote.
Yeah, I hope they do that, and I hope they're successful. At least the public will see, well, we already have the vote, but maybe get a revote, get them on the record again with this new information. All right, one final topic. You wanted to talk about related to elections again, as we still are. The dust is still settling, sadly, on the national election, and you want to bring up California and some voting trends in California, and the fact that there's still stinking counting ballots in the state of California month after the election.
Months. So this has gone on for more than a month from Election Day. Election Day was November the 5th. Here we are, we're speaking on December the 10th. There is at least, I believe, one House race in California that they're still officially counting the ballots. The Associated Press has called all the races. And what has struck me and a lot of other people and I don't watch this as closely as I watch the Minnesota House races and the 3 recounts we've had here in Minnesota, but California was one of the states with the largest shift to the Republicans of all the states. So we had somebody did a rank order of the states. This isn't by absolute number of votes. California is the biggest state. This is by percentage. So I believe New York and New Jersey, more than 10% of voters switch from Democrat to Republican. Huge shift to the right, huge shift in favor of Republicans in New York, New Jersey, Florida as well. You thought Florida was already pretty Republican. This last election, percentage-wise and vote-wise, got a lot more Republican. And then coming in fourth was California. It was something like 8-9% of voters switched from Democrat to Republican in this last race. A huge shift to the right. And somehow, in the face of that, Republicans lost 3 House seats. They were the incumbents. They lost these seats, and the pattern was the same. On election night, they looked like they were winners. They looked like they had gotten reelected. And then they keep counting. And it's never been clear where these ballots are coming from, that it takes them 4 or 5 weeks to count. but the result is always the same. The more ballots they count, the better the Democrats did. And the pattern continues that at some point in each of these three races, the result flipped, that the Republican who led on election night, who was the defending incumbent, all of a sudden fell behind by a few dozen votes. The counting stops. They had all these votes, and then coincidentally, in each case, when the correct result was reached, the Democrat won, the voting mysteriously stopped. So we don't know where these votes were coming from and why it took them weeks. And again, we were mentioning Florida. Florida is a very big state too. It has one of the largest population. They count every race on election night. By election night, they're done counting.
And that's
But
kind of what it
here we-
speaks to, this trust in our election process. And, here in Minnesota, Steve Simon, our Secretary of State, runs around talking about we're the greatest election system in the state. But then all these things happen to erode trust. And he should care more about that. The Secretary of State in California should care more about that. We're losing trust in the election process when this kind of stuff happens year after year after year. And whether they get to the right result or not is one thing. And maybe they are going to, and maybe they're not. But the process and the transparency and what people are watching erodes trust in the election system. If anybody working in elections should want that as their goal to fix that, it's not happening in Minnesota under Steve Simon. It's not happening in California either, and it's not happening nationally. So I think there's a lot of work to do there. Well, we're going to leave it at that. We've been rambling on about these different election issues, but it's a great topic in between the election and the beginning of session in January. Thanks for listening to the American Experiment Podcast. We'll see you next week.